Hey everybody, today's video I'm going to show you Azure API Management. We will explore what it is, we'll explore the main concepts, we'll see an example for each of the concepts. We will explore what is a developer portal, how you can read documentation for the API from the developer portal. We'll see how to create APIs manually and also import them from the definition. We'll also see how to apply policies to the APIs like cores, cache, or transformations. And finally, we will see how we can release new versions of the API without breaking older versions. Okay, let's start with what is Azure API Management, and we will see that with this diagram, which I took from the Microsoft documentation. I think it's very good, and we put it Azure API Management here in the middle, which is where we want it because that's what it's actually doing. It's a proxy between the clients and the servers. And clients in this case can be anything that you can think as a client, right? It can be a mobile application, your business partner, your developers, and your employees also. But it also can be IoT devices or any Azure service. This is the general word of client. And in the other side, we have the servers, which is again, they can be your PaaS services, Azure Functions, App Services, Kubernetes. They can be your on-premise servers. That's basically what is Azure API Management. API Management is centralizing all the APIs that we have in the right side in one place, in one entry point that we have called API Management. It will allow us to publish, it will allow us to secure, to maintain, and to analyze all our traffic for the APIs. Azure API Management is divided into three concepts, which are the administrator interface, the gateway, and the developer portal. The gateway, it's a mechanism that is implemented already. We don't deal with it. It's a concept that they created it and how they call it. The key features for that is that it will help us to verify the API keys, to enforce the rate limits that we specify. Also, they can transform their requests and they can route the calls when the client call the endpoint that we have for the Azure API Management. It will route that call based on the API that we are hitting. For example, the API gateway can be in server 1, API 2 can be in server B, right? And it is going to be able to do that routing based on the path that we specify. And finally, it can also cache responses. This is internal, we will handle with this, but it's useful that you know that the other part that we have is the administrator interface, and this is the one where we will be working most of the time as an administrator, because in our case we are going to be the administrators and also the developers, but in the real world that is not the case. So the administrator interface, it's where we define the users, we define groups, and also where we import the API specifications to the API management. We can also create the APIs manually. We can implement security, like we can implement rate limits, caching, cores, and also, and this is key for Azure API Management, is that we can define policies in it, such as transformation of the request. We can define caching, we can define cores. So those type of stuff that we can have are done via the administrator interface. And also finally, the analytics here, we can also check the amount of requests that we have, what is the top performance for each endpoint that we define in it. And finally, we have the developer portal. The developer portal is usually consumed by the developers, as the name suggests, and it's to read the APIs documentation that we have in our instance. They can also test the APIs. If you have seen the Swagger, when we specify the APIs and we can test based on those specifications, so it's similar in this case. We have the documentation, we have code examples, and also the developers can subscribe to APIs. Of course, they have to have an agreement, they have to log into the developer portal, and we will explore that, how that can be done. And finally, we can also see the analytics of the developer portal in it. So in this case, we'll be using 3 APIs, and these are I taken from the internet. It's not mine, they are not mine. The first one is colors API. This basically returns a random color. This is the one that we'll be using, but it has other operations, but we'll be using just get the random color. This is the open API specification that we have for this, and this one will be imported using this file. The second one is the calculator API, which is similar to the other one. This is the API specification. This has a key feature because this API accepts only HTTP. So we will see why, even if this is only HTTP, we can access it using APIM using HTTPS. And finally, we will have HTTP bin, which is a popular one to learn about HTTP. This doesn't have an HTTP, I mean, it has, but we are not going to use it, an API specification. So we'll use it and we'll create it manually in the API management. And finally, this is the UI. Once we have set up the API, we'll use the endpoint that we have from APIM, and we'll set it up here, and we will see some behaviors based on the product rate limit that we have. But let's start with the demo part. So this is the APIM UI, and I forgot to mention that APIs are packaged into products. Think about products like a collection of APIs. Let's say that, remember, sometimes you have a free tier where you say like, we have 5 requests per minute, but also you have another tier where you have unlimited number of requests. This type of enforcement, you can have it using different products. So those products are a collection of APIs which has certain policies in it. And also another thing that we can add is, so let's say a developer wants to subscribe to a product. Once they subscribe to the product, they can access all the APIs in the product. And we can say, if you want to subscribe to this product, you will have to wait for an approval from the administrator. This is something that we also can do with the products. So in this case, this is the centralized endpoint that they will be using. Let's start with the developer portal. The developer portal is that platform, this is that UI that I mentioned, that where we can see the requests, where we can see the APIs, the products, we can subscribe to products and APIs, and we can test the APIs also. At the beginning, if I go to the developer portal, you will see that it is not deployed. This is the URL for the developer portal, and you will see it says like it hasn't been published. There are some organizations who doesn't use the built-in, but they self-host their UI, and then they linked. In this case, we will use the default one. Okay, so to publish the developer portal, the first thing that we will need to do is go here into the developer portal, go to portal overview, and hit developer portal. This is going to initialize the UI. This is the UI it was initialized. When since I am in the administrator role, I will have the permissions to do the modifications here, but usually the teams customize this UI based on the organization's standards. So they will put the logo, they will put the colors, and if you see here, this is the default one. Okay, if I go here, I can change everything here. I can just delete this one or whatever. So in order to access it as a user, I will need to open, so to access it, we will need to use a private mode. So I will open a new incognito mode here, and I'll paste the URL that is giving me here. So this is the one, and I am going to put it here. Okay, so okay, there we go. So it is still saying that it is not been published. Once it is once we hit here the developer portal, there is this button is enabled now where we can publish our current version. So let's say that we finish the customization of it, we just publish it, and there we go. We will wait a minute, and now it was published, and we can go here. So yeah, there we go. Now this is the developer UI where I can navigate through the APIs, you see. So by default, I forgot to mention that, but by default APIM is built in with an API called Echo. So the Echo has some operations. I'm gonna explain this in a moment so that you don't confuse with this one. But what I mentioned is there's also one API and 2 products. This is the started product and the unlimited product. The difference between them is that the started has a rate limit of 5 requests, 6 requests per minute, and the unlimited doesn't have it. And also to subscribe to the unlimited, we need an approval. We can check here, and this is the UI. I haven't logged into this, but by default I can navigate them here. I can see the operations that it has, and I can even test. Okay, so here you see that we have these operations, and in this side I can try it. And since I haven't subscribed to the product, I don't have a subscription key to test, so I won't be able to test this until I subscribe. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna sign up, and I'm gonna use my personal email. I'm gonna put a fake password here. I have signed up, and they send me the instructions to the email, so I will check that in a moment. I won't show that. Okay, now I validated my email. I can log in now with my personal email, and I can put my password. So there we go. Now I am logged in. I can see my profile. And here I can list the subscriptions. I don't have a subscription yet, so that's why, but I still can have the APIs. Here I can see the APIs, the products. So here in the APIs, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna subscribe to a product. When you subscribe to a product, you will get the subscription key. So I'm gonna search for the started and I'm going to subscribe. Now I see that since the started product doesn't have a approval, then it was already created it. I have the primary key here and the secondary key. I will show these primary keys and secondary keys because when you are seeing this video, this won't exist. You shouldn't share this one. This is sensitive. You can test this API, and I will do it with this. So I'm going to create the resource, and I am going to use the primary started. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm going to send this, and this is what I wanted to show you. So now we have unable to complete the request because of a course issue. When we are consuming resources from a different domain, we need to add something called course. So that's something that we can add here in the configuration. So if you go into the developer portal and here, it will say like we need to enable course, because if not, then we won't be able to do tests from the developer portal. And I want to show you, before doing that, I want to show you that something that we are going to discuss later. But these APIs, there's something called policies. Policies are things that we can verify, like caching. We can have course, we can have transformations, and if you see in this case there is no policy at all. If I go back and I say okay, enable course for this, and then we will go back to APIs and we'll go to all APIs, we'll see that now you see one here. And if we go now back to the developer portal and we test again, we'll see that this now we get a 200. This is something that we'll be using back and forth. But finally, I'm going to subscribe to the unlimited product, because the unlimited product has an approval. And because it has an approval, I as an administrator need to go back to the portal and approve it. So I'm gonna search for unlimited and I'm going to subscribe to that. So it says, like, you see the difference between this. I don't have the subscription key immediately. It says like it was submitted. Now if I go back to the products, to the subscriptions that I have, you see now there are two subscriptions for the started and unlimited, and you will see here what is the owner. The owner is Brian Ortiz, and this unlimited has the submitted state. So I'm gonna come here and I'm going to activate subscription and I'm gonna confirm the subscription. So I go back to this, I refresh this one, I go to profile, and now I can see both primary key and secondary key also for unlimited. Let's start adding APIs to the existing one, and as mentioned before, we have two ways to add it. It's manually or from a definition. And here in this we can see that we cannot only have REST APIs, but we can have WebSocket, we can have GraphQL or gRPC, and we can import them from different specifications, from OpenAPI, WSDL. Finally, also we have the ability to import the API if it is already deployed into a Azure service. So if we have our API deployed to an app service, we can pass the resource name of that API, and APIM is going to immediately know how to import it into here. First one that we are going to create is manually using HTTP bin. So let's create this one. We would call it HTTP bin. That's going to be the name, and the URL, let's say that's the hosted. We will use the default one, okay, and we'll pass this one into here. So this is the API URL prefixes. This is the central endpoint that we have, but in order to avoid conflicts, it's better to have a suffix of that. So if we do this HTTP bin, then it will add this at the end of this of the central endpoint. I'm going to go to the advanced options because I want to add this API to the products that we have. So I'm gonna do the starter and unlimited, and that's it. I'm gonna hit create, and when I'm going to hit create, you see that this HTTP API has many operations. We'll be using anything, which returns basically whatever we pass. So if we go into this one and I type anything, it will give me the request. I mean the headers and whatever we pass to that. So if we try to do that, you see now the HTTP was created and we can use this. So if we want to test that anything using the APIM endpoint, we need to collect the subscription key. I already did it from here, and I am going to test from my terminal because I'm going to show you something. And if I go here and I test, you will see that this says that the resource not found. And the reason for that is because we defined the API, but we didn't define any operation. So to do so, we have to go back to the API, and we need to add operations to it. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to add an operation equal anything, and the name, this is going to be this is going to be anything. This is it. I'm going to save the operation, and there we go. Now we will see that we have one operation here, and I can go back. There we go. Now this is working. We have a 200, and this is what they return. Now, if we go back to the developer portal, we'll see that there is one more API called HTTP bin. And if we go to the HTTP bin, we'll see the operation that we defined. We can test it from here also, and we will send it here, and it will also give me 200. You see, if we have many operations, we will need to add them manually one by one, which is not practical. So the next one, we will import them using the OpenAPI specification. So let's add that one from the OpenAPI specification. And what we have to pass here is where is located the OpenAPI specification. We'll import this calculator first, and we'll put here this one. In a moment, this will be automatically populated. You see, it's basic calculator. And the suffix that I'm going to add for this one is going to be calc. And also, this is useful because remember that I mentioned that this API only accepts HTTP. I'm going to use both because I want to access also from APIM using HTTPS. And I'm going to add it into the starter and unlimited product again. So in this case, since I am passing the specification, I won't have to import the operations one by one. They will be automatically created by it. So here we go. You see there are 4 operations and all are automatically populated. Now, if I go back to the developer portal, something that I want to mention here, I go back again to the APIs. Now there is another API called basic calculator. I'm going to test this one, which add 2 numbers. The default is 51 plus 49, which is 100. And I send, and you will see that this will fail. This will fail, and the reason for that is because there is an issue in the configuration. I haven't explained this one, but this is the workflow that the request is going to have. So here in the front end, we have the OpenAPI specification. This, if I go and hit the editor mode, this will show me the specification for that API. So if I want to do a change, I will do it here, which usually you don't do it here. And then this is the inbound processing. We can apply the policies before we send it to the backend. So you see the rows are doing that workflow. Before we move it to the backend, we do the processing here, and then it is moved to the backend. And also we can have also processing in the outbound. When we get the response from the backend, we can also apply certain policies here, which, for example, if we want to transform an XML from an old API to a JSON, we can do it here. If we want to delete additional headers, we can do it here because we don't want that the client knows that. So that's the workflow. You see that the backend has HTTPS, but no, the backend is not able to receive HTTPS. It was not intended to do that, but by default APIM has the HTTPS. So we'll change that here into in the settings section, and the web service URL is going to change from HTTPS to HTTP. And I'll save this, and once this is saved, I'll go back. I'll say that there was an internal server error before. Okay, so we'll test again. It's 51 plus 49. We'll send the request, and now you see that it's 200, and this is the result here. It's 100, and you see the response is in XML. So now the request is working. I can do the same from any other client. Finally, we will import the last one, which is colors. We'll do the same. We'll add another API. We'll use this one, and I'll pass this colors API. When I do this, it will automatically populate this one, and I'm gonna delete the name of Mark Karins in here. Remember that I said that it's useful to add suffix here because we need to avoid collisions between the APIs. But in this case, the API specification already have that path. So if I add that one, I'm gonna add it so that you see how it's going to change that in a moment. So I'm going to add again the products started and unlimited, and I'm going to create that. When I do this, this is going to create the colors API again with all the operations that we have automatically. And now there we go. We see that we have the get random color, which is the one we'll be using. But if you see here, the request URL has duplicate colors, and it's because what I mentioned, if we go into the design for the front end of that specification, you see that the path is already in slash colors. So that's why it's, in this case, it's not needed the suffix. So I will delete it, because in this case we don't need it. So I'm gonna delete this and save it again. And that's it. So go back to test and we'll see that now the colors was deleted. So let's get random color, and now you see that request URL, it's colors only. Go back to portal again, just to show you that the API was created here, and we will test from here again. So this is the colors API, and we'll test get random color, and there we go, send. There we go. Now we get light blue. You don't see it, but it's light blue here. Let's see the power of rate limits, because the two products that I have, the starter has a limit of 5 requests per minute, not per second, and the other one is unlimited. So if I go here into the policies for the starter, we'll see that the rate limit for that it's 5 calls per 60 seconds. And the other is unlimited. So let's see how that works in a real scenario. For that, I will use this UI. This UI is going to do requests to that API, and it's going to fill these circles with colors. Okay, and the issue that we have, if I hit this, we'll see that there's course issue. So course issue is because we are using a different domain. Remember that we have the issue with the developer portal. We will have the same issue in this one because we are accessing from a different client. So the solution for this is in the policy that we added for course. We need to update this, and we need to add another origin. In this case, it's color websites. And I'm gonna save that. And when I go back to the client and I start again, now you will see that it is working. The request is it's working, and it is filling this circle with the colors. Now you see, now there is just like hundreds of calls. I will reset this, and I will check the endpoint for the one that have the rate limit of 5 to request. So I'm going to change that, and I'm going to paste it here, submit. And when I go back and I hit this, you see after 5 calls it fails. And the reason for that is if I go into this one and I hit this endpoint, you will see that the rate limit exceeded. Try again in 60 seconds. That is the product policy working in place. So let's talk about policies. Policies is the central thing in API management because it has so many features that we can apply to the requests that are coming from the client or the ones that are coming from the backend before we move to the client. We already saw cores, but we also be discussing caching and transformations, and they can be applied at different scopes. In the case of the course policy, we apply it to all the APIs as we selected here, but we can apply it also to one API in particular, and we can go even to an operation, and we select the operation and we can apply it only a policy to this operation. This is useful, for example, and this is useful for caching, where we only want to cache one operation or two. Let's see how the policy definition looks like. And for this, we'll go into the course that we defined already, and we'll go into the editor mode, and we'll see that there's two mains, like the inbound and the outbound. So the inbound are policies that we apply to the request before we send it to the backend. So if there is a transformation of the header that we want to add, then we'll do it here, and in this case also course. And the other important one is outbound. It's when we get the response from the backend and we do the modifications before sending to the client. So let's say that we want to change from XML to JSON, or we want to delete some headers because it is showing information that is sensitive for us. The other two, which is backend and on error, we won't see that, but it's similar to what the inbound and outbound does. Let's add another one here in the colors API, and for just the get random color, we are going to add the caching. We'll add the caching. We'll check this, and then it says like cache response. And I want that this cache only lasts for 20 seconds. So I save this, and now every time that I do a request within the 20 seconds window, I will get the same color, and it will change after 20 seconds. Now if I go and check the definition for this, you will see that it is going to do in the inbound a lookup, and also for the outbound it is going to store the response that we get from the backend for 20 seconds. So let's test this one from core. In this case, I'm gonna just use this one, paste this. So in this case, it was Rosa. And if I hit again, I will get the same and I will get the same within the 20 seconds window. Let's see now the transformations policy. Transformation policy can be applied to anything like inbound or outbound. It can include headers, delete headers. We can replace strings into the request or the response. And that's what we will be doing. If I test this one, I remember that this is going to return anything that is that we pass. Okay, so in this case, it is giving me the whole headers, and also if you see the method, it's get. So I'm gonna change that method to something else like get updated to see the power of these transformations. So to do so, I'm going to in the design section and the outbound. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to create here, there is like show it snippet transformation. There is one that is called find and replace from get to get updated. Let's say like this. So let's set this anything, and there we go. Now we see that the response has the get updated. It was replaced. Now if we go into the basic calculator, remember that the basic calculator, when we do quest, it is returning an XML. So this is the XML that is returning. This happens usually in legacy APIs, and we want to make it compatible with JSON. So there is a policy to do this transformation to JSON. Let's apply this. We will add that policy into this operation, and for that I'll do this add policy here in the outbound, and it is called this one. It is called XML to JSON. It is provided by default by Azure. So I'm gonna save this. I will test again. I will send the request. When you do the request, you see the response is in JSON. Now the other type of transformation that we can do is that if you see the response for this one, in the response there is two headers which is saying like the version of the ASP.NET that we are using, and this is not useful for the client, and is exposing some information that we don't want to. I'm gonna change this one. I'm gonna delete them, and to do so I will add another policy into this add to integers operation, and here again is in the outbound because it's the one that we are returning, and the one that we are going to add is called set header. So the set header is going to search for this name, and it's going to, if it exists, it's going to delete it, and say it for the other one which is x powered by, and it's going to delete it. I'll test. I will send the request, and now you see that the two headers that we had, now they are gone. The final part that we'll see in terms of policy is something called name values. Name values are like variables that we can use inside the policies, so that we don't have to hard code values in the policy definition. So we'll add one that is called time now, so that the response that we send to the client will have the time in which we added that header. The value is going to be this one. Can be plain text. It can be also an expression like in this case. Display name is going to be time now, and I will save this. Now I will add a header to the response based on this new value. Okay, so we go into the HTTP bin. Let's say this one, in this one, and we'll add it here in the outbound. So we go into the outbound base and we paste this one, right? So what we're doing here is we are adding a header called X request receive time, and the action is going to override if it exists, and then the value is going to be the name value that we just created. So once here, I'll send the request, and now if you see, the response has a HTTP header called X request receive time, and this is the value which we get it from the name values. The last part of this session, it's going to show you how you can deploy new versions of the API without breaking changes of the older versions. So far we have seen that we accessed all these operations using the same path, but let's say that now we have a new version of the HTTP bin, and that we want to still use the old version and the new version. The new version is going to have one more operation, and it's going to be released for new clients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new version here, and I'm going to put it the name v2. I'm going to leave the version scheme in the path, so that in the endpoint of the APIM, when we specify /v2, we will be pointing to this one. Okay, now the v2 version was created. By default, the original one, APIM put the name original without any other path in the domain. So if we go into anything and we want to test this, you will see that now the path has changed, and it added the v2 identifier here. And if I send it, it's okay, it still works. If I want to add another operation into this one, I can do it without affecting the old version of the API, and that's something that I will do. We'll call request inspection, and it's going to be user agent, and the description, I'm not going to add any description for this one. That's it. When I go to the /user agent, I will get this. Okay, in this case it's null, but it is returning the user agent header. The original one doesn't have the new operation. We can have both live together. We can have separate them. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you find it useful and you like APIM as much as I like. We saw the developer portal. We saw how we can navigate the APIs, read the documentation, test the APIs from it. But we also saw how we can import or create the APIs from the API definition. We saw how we can enforce policies into those APIs, such as limit the rate, how we can apply transformations or caching or cores using those policies. And also we saw the workflow that it takes, like the inbound, the backend, the outbound processing that we have. And finally, we saw how we can have a new version of the existing API without breaking older versions. Thank you and see you in the next one.